Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on AI. We will be getting started in just a second with our panelists. We have a great group of experts today to talk to you about kind of where AI has been and where it's going. In the meantime, I'd say get comfy, grab your beverage of choice, and we'll get started. We're just going to give everyone a second to log in. In the meantime, in the chat, feel free to put your questions. But I would also like to know, what is your beverage of choice? Are you a coffee drinker? Are you a soda person? Are you tea? Are you water? I would love to hear. This is always how I get recommendations for new types of drinks and things like that. So would love to hear kind of what you're drinking these days. And panelists, while you can't see them, are here. I'm happy to hear what you are drinking as well. And we'll get started in about a minute once we have everyone kind of logged in and comfortable. In the meantime, tea, solid choice, always my favorite. We just learned that Josh, one of our panelists, our lovely host today, is trying to become a tea person. So maybe we can help there, Caroline. In the meantime, if you don't know who I am, my name is Emily Delora. I help run our webinars here at GoOne. I am a member of the marketing team. And if you're new to GoOne, we are a content aggregator. And so what that means is we are the middle person between the content that's created for employees for their skill development, their compliance trainings, and we bring that to you through LMS or HRIS systems or directly. So we're really here to provide as much learning as possible to employees. And this is just another way to do that, right? So today we're going to hear from an incredible group of people who I'm going to now bring on stage, and they're going to take over. I'm going to disappear for a bit, and I'll see you at the end. All right. I'm bringing you all on. It's your time to take over. You can unmute yourselves. And Josh, take us away.
If I can just find the unmute button. Well, hello, everyone. So excited to be here with all of you and with our esteemed panel. I'm Josh Penzell. I am the VP of AI Innovation and Strategy at ELB Learning. And today we have a panel of folks that I'm pretty humbled and honored to be talking about and introducing. So I will start by introducing Dr. Cornelia Walther. Dr. Cornelia Walther is a distinguished humanitarian leader and author with over 2 decades of experience at the United Nations. She directs POSE, which is supposed to be a French pronunciation. I, as many of you now know, do not have a background in speaking French. So she directs POSE, a global alliance driving systemic change for people in the planet. And she's a visiting scholar at the Wharton AI and Analytics Initiative. Please welcome Dr. Cornelia Walther. And I'm curious, Cornelia, what is your beverage of choice?
Tea and coffee, not together, but depending on the time and day.
That would be interesting. Actually, I've never. Is there a name for a mix of a drink that's a tea and a coffee? There must be. Someone will let me know.
I think not yet. You can try it. I'm sure you can patent it. I mean, in time and days where you can have coffee with olive oil, which eludes me. Maybe.
So there you go. All right. Some idea out there for someone to go patent. All right, next. Thank you, Cornelia. Scott Provence, the VP of Integrated Learning Services at ELB Learning. He is an award-winning instructional designer and author. He actually recently developed a machine learning model to quantify empathetic traits in workplace communication. Pretty incredible. And he's written Fail to Learn, a manifesto for creating innovative training programs. Scott, beverage of choice.
I was never a coffee drinker, even though I was born and raised in Seattle. But ever since we had the little one, it's all coffee all the time.
Yeah, I get it. Awesome. All right. And last but certainly not least, Nikki Lee is the head of impact evaluation assessment and research at Google, where she leads AI-driven initiatives to improve education and knowledge management. Her work has enhanced learning experience for millions globally, integrating cutting-edge technology into user-focused platforms. And I think I just made an error when I said millions, right, Nikki?
It's actually billions with a B.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Congratulations on that. And it's really, I don't know many people have billions of anything. And hey, Nikki, beverage of choice.
I'm a barista. I'll take a vanilla matcha with oat, please.
Ooh, okay, that's good. So for me, I would be a coffee person if I could still stomach it. I'm trying to be a tea person. Water and then Diet Coke. Depending on how aggressive I'm going, I'm not drinking one this morning, so I think we're good. You know what I mean? All right, cool. Well, hey, let's get into some questions because I'm really eager to understand where we're coming from, right? And first things first, I think I'd like to just, get a state of like, where are we? what hit you? What's on your mind with regard to AI of the past year? So you could, I'll start with Nikki. What's on your mind with the past year? What struck you, right? What have you been thinking about with AI?
Recently I took on a new team under my management, and it includes really the user trust and regulation team for Google search, and really understanding what do we mean by user trust, because we're seeing increasing adoption of this across different populations, kids, youth, and high school. But we're seeing they will play with it, they'll try it, but then they'll abandon it because it's not really serving them. They'll play with it, but it's not giving them what they expect. And so people will define trust as, is it giving me what I anticipate and expected? And if it doesn't, we don't get more than one bite at that apple with some populations. And then we see increasing usage in the workplace, which is really being driven top down. We are being told we expect productivity gains. We expect these things. So add this into your products, add this into your courses, your LMS. We want to see personalization, adaptation, individual learning. And so we're seeing pushing of this from the top, but are we seeing organic adoption there? So how do we gain user trust in that? And really trying to approach the generative AI transition from a really first principles place of what's the use case? Why are we doing this? What can we get out of it versus from a technical solution perspective?
I love that. It's almost one thing that occurs to me, right, is this is something that every individual has and they'll expect to be able to use things the way they want to be able to use them, right? And so trying to push down what works for the most number of people is no longer an option, right? And instead of maybe putting AI into our solutions, we might want to be figuring out how do we enable every individual to have their own experience within our solutions, right? That's a really fascinating view of trust. I want to talk more about that. Scott, what's on your mind with regards to AI?
Yeah, well, I love Nikki's point. I would say one of the other, because I totally agree with that. It's certainly on my mind too. One of the other things that I find myself thinking about a lot and also discussing a lot when I will consult or talk with clients is the importance and attention we need to pay to terminology. So every news article and talk that we see on the airwaves right now has got AI in the title. And we all know this, but as a reminder, AI has been around for a while. The big flood we're seeing now is not necessarily AI that's just hitting the market, but large language models, neural networks, deep learning, all of these different terminologies. And so being really, I think maybe to tie back to Nikki's point, the more precise we can be with, talking about integrating AI. AI has been here in whatever system we're using for decades. Are we integrating large language models? Are we integrating generative, predictable text-based patterns, or are we, what we need to do is a classification pattern, which has, got a long history of its own. So how can we be more precise when we talk about this blanket term AI?
Can I ask a follow-up question, which is, and this is where my mind goes, yes, and I wouldn't have known how to do any of that stuff previously, right? I couldn't integrate AI, right? But now I could go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need to create a machine learning solution that does X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it could help me create that. So I think maybe when we say AI, and for the purpose of this, we are talking about Gen AI, but I think maybe when people say AI, they don't mean the technology. This gets to what Nikki's saying. It's really this sudden democratization, this sudden flood of everyone has access to possibly building anything they want, including something with all sorts of AI, right? And the reason that's possible is because of a form of AI, right? It's generative AI, and that we can talk to it in our language.
Yep, absolutely.
So I feel it's interesting. We got trust, right? We got sort of like specificity of language and definition. Cornelia, what's the thing on your mind?
Yeah, two things. One, building further on this aspect of a need for more granular talking and specificity. I feel like now there seem to be two camps. One of people who is super excited about the efficiency and effectiveness of AI, and then the other one which basically foresees the Terminator scenario, and in the meantime all the jobs will be eliminated. And I think what both camps somehow fail to talk about is the fact that the technology that we use is as good as the humans that design deliver it. And so it's the old saying of garbage in, garbage out versus values in, values out. We can't expect the technology of tomorrow to reflect values that the humans of today, us, do not manifest. And that somehow leads me to what I call the ABCD of issues, which is agency erosion, the bond decay, the climate challenges, and finally the divided society.
Amazing. Nikki, yeah.
No, what we call, inside Google, we have a term called the human in the loop, because this is so important. We need to consider the human in the loop, because we are the ones who are selecting what data this gets trained on, we are making decisions along the way. And I often, when I try to explain the actual mechanical and technical processes, I often talk about how we are the one raising these AI systems. They are like our toddlers, and we're the ones teaching and training these ones. We hold them, it's a mirror back up to our own societies. So that's how these biases emerge, and that's how these things occur, because we are the ones putting our own biases into it. So I love your ABCD because it's a really great framework to begin a discussion about that biases.
There's a few ways we in L&D can approach this biasy thing, right? One is from this idea of us. How do we deal with it ourselves? And then how do we deal with it as the ability to go into an organization and deal with it? So I want to dig into that. What can we do, or the folks on this, audience, the human behavior experts, right? Who might have the ear of their leaders. What can we do to reduce the bias? And then what do we do to reduce the bias in the model or AI or whatever? And then what do we do to reduce other biases that are occurring because we're rolling out AI, right? Because we're rolling out AI and we're seeing interesting demographics with, for instance, Nikki, I think you've brought this up, right? And there's a study, men are adopting faster than women. We don't know why. And then that's going to affect so what can we practically do, right, when it comes to integrating this idea of bias and whatever into our practice? Scott, I want to go to you for a second, because you think about this, and you go into organizations and think about, like, literally what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, Josh, you and I kind of share, and this will be maybe for down the road in the conversation, but a very unique background, not a data scientist, came up through academic, courses and instruction, but specifically teaching on language, English creative writing in colleges. And to me, I know that I already mentioned this idea of like the awareness we need to develop in terms of AI terminology, even deeper than that. When we think about the risks of the biases, one of the tracks that I teach on a lot is DEI training, raising unconscious, awareness of unconscious biases. When I think about the amount of unconscious biases we possess as people, but that are also baked into our language, these are unconscious biases in linguistic structures that are now getting fed into algorithms that has the risk of making that unconscious bias that is already present even less conscious if we are turning it over to the algorithms to now trust and churn out their language. So my biggest concern is that rather than raising our awareness of our own biases in language, we're taking those pre-biased languages, plugging them into systems, and then taking their output as possible. And so that's a big risk.
So is the idea that we need to be more aware that just like us, this thing has perhaps unknown biases, right? Because we fed it that. And so we need to treat it in a way that it might have those, right? And so it's not unbiased.
Exactly. And in Nikki's post in the chat, it's that reinforcing that feedback loop of if I have a little bit of language that I wasn't even aware contains generations of biases, and I think is now kind of innocuous because it's just been kind of baked into our system, I run that risk of putting it into an AI program that might even increase or have that kind of reinforcing effect of biases.
Right. And that exists in humans already. Right.
Exactly.
So it seems like we just need to apply the same processes. One thing that's interesting, right, is we don't know why it's biased. There was a study where someone, they introduced themselves to ChatGPT as a Los Angeles, Chargers fan, right? And then say, hey, I want to import an illegal plant. And it goes, I can't help you with that. Sorry, man. And then they say, oh, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Can I take a plant? And it goes, sure. So what is limiting? Why is it biased against, what's causing that? And we'll never know, right? So, Cornelia, what practically, right then, what can we do? We can't train the models. So Scott seems to be saying we need to reinforce to the human, right, that they are biased, therefore the machine is biased, and we need to sort of acknowledge that. Cornelia, what how do we do it with you? What do you think?
I think the magic word that Scott mentioned is awareness. And what I think in terms of very practical steps forward, both for this generation and for the next one, we need to integrate systematically double literacy in schools, which is on the one hand, a holistic understanding of brain and body. So in a way, natural intelligence. And on the other hand, algorithmic literacy, not just what's the latest cool model out there on the market, but why does it work the way it does? And what goes in, what comes out. And both of them should be embedded in a holistic understanding of self and society.
That sounds to me scarily like not a technology how-to thing, but more like a mindset shift of this is a new paradigm we're in, first principles, Nikki, right? Because what you said is natural intelligence versus AI. And it's not versus, it sounds like it's more how do I work? How do I understand my AI partner? And then how do I natural AI work together? Because I
think we can harness the complementarity of both, but we should shift out of our mindset of either or.
I love that. Nikki, what you snaps talking, like I feel like we could go,
This is such a great group of people to have this conversation. I believe, don't quote me on this, it might have been the WHO, but someone referred to this as the fourth industrial revolution, because, we're introducing a leap in technology to the world. So, as we introduce the internet, as we introduced, the industrial revolution, where there's a great shift in efficiency and optimization, there were a lot of the same fears about removing, access and, opportunity and things like that. And really what I view as the true need is our relationship to technology shifts, because what we need to do is upskill people on their judgment and their discernment skills and, their consideration. And yes, we may not be doing the same execution skills as before. When we introduce textile mills, we weren't necessarily doing the ones who were doing the weaving, the machines were, but now we are maintaining the machines. We're doing these things. And so there's a shift in the need of the skills that we need. And I think, like Cornelia was saying, it's these other skills that are going to be so key and critical for us to evaluate what does the machine produce? What is the AI producing? How do we edit? How do we refine what this is doing? How do we re-engineer the prompts, which is a big shift in what we are having people inside of Google doing. Our technical writers are not necessarily writing the documentation outputs, but now we're telling them how to edit and actually train the models and train the AI to almost be like, I don't know, high school English teachers, to be like, hey, edit the prompts and do it in a different way. Yeah, be a thought partner. And it's actually, we're using higher order skills of not just the execution, but really changing our, skills are necessary. The behaviors are changing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find sometimes when I'm writing now, instead of, I used to copy and paste it out of ChatGPT and start editing it, but now I keep going, right? I just say, hey, that second sentence, I don't know. Hey, the first paragraph, can we try doing that? And I let it make these changes for me in some ways because I want to see what it can do. And it's a new form of writing, right? Because beforehand, I would never have been able to hire a partner to come in and do that. But now I have this metacognitive partner to do stuff. You hit on a few things. Yeah, Cornelia, go ahead.
No, just building further on that, I think to fully leverage the benefit that we can actually take for our own development from AI, we need to be acutely aware of that process, because it's a very different thing to be aware of the interplay and the interaction that we have with our AI buddy, or to just take the outputs and walk the path of least resistance and just gobble down the outputs and take them for granted. And let's be honest, the human being likes to avoid cognitive effort. So if we can avoid it, then we do. And that's where I see the big risk of agency decay, which is because the brain is a muscle. Use it or lose it. And unless we systematically curate this acute awareness of the risk and of the very fine line between experimentation and using and relying to full-blown addiction, that is a very slippery slope.
Yeah, but I also feel like we have the way we address that's going to have to be different because it's out there, right? And so how do we, Cornelia, I think is a good follow-up. Is it really now about motivation? It's less about information. Is it, you know what I mean? Because what you're talking about is getting people to change how they are approaching something. And you're saying that humans will take the easiest, cheapest path, right? So how do I begin to retrain in a way to promote that and incentivize that? Is that us? Is that an organization? Is that a teacher? Is that a society? Do they have to set up those guardrails? Like, how do we get there?
So for me, it's coming back to the double literacy piece, but I would be interested to hear what others are thinking. But I think once we have this more granular understanding of who we are and of this multidimensional composition of the human being as a combination of aspirations, emotions, thoughts, and sensations, and where the brain is embedded in a body and the body is embedded in a society, all of a sudden, it appears like this organically evolving kaleidoscope, which I'm curious to discover more about. And where all of a sudden AI can help me to discover more about myself.
I love that description you just said, Cornelia. And it makes me think about how much, especially with the latest, just like look at the latest technology. Again, AI has been around for decades, but if we just look at large language models, almost as the way you're describing it, I rely a lot on LLMs right now to give me the quick output. So I got to write an email, like just do this for me, or I got to do a quick whatever thing for a client. Can you just like write this out? If I do it that way, that's my lazy side. Like I don't want to think about this. I'm just going to outsource the busy work of my day. Fine. Passable maybe as a thing I can kind of skate by, and not really not serving me in the long run. But also to your point, I'm my own cognitive laziness is allowing me to treat large language model as an output based function, rather than what I really should be doing is having it describe, whatever, the Revolutionary War, and looking at its language and saying, what is it about its terminology that can give me a history lesson on the structures and biases of how this is created. How can I use this as an analytical or research tool to then come to my own findings of, hey, look at how it summarized this, and what perspectives is it ignoring, and what actions and events is it highlighting, and what does that tell us about ourselves as a exercise in exposing our own, again, kind of exposing our own biases. This is what the system is reflecting back to us. Or as our zeitgeist.
I love that. And one thing, Scott, it's like, if I'm writing something, I could just have it write something for me, or I could say, write 5 things for me, write 5 versions of this, and then I can react to those, right? And that might give me a spark of thought for something else. And it becomes this metacognitive tool. And I think that's what I just want to reflect, is I'm hearing sort of 2, I don't want to say action items, but paths for folks on this webinar that they can take. One is like theory of mind, or teaching people about how they learn, how their brain works, how their natural intelligence works, how it all connects, how it connects to society, to what you're saying, Cornelia, right? And then I think there's this other thing, which is we need to create experiences as we create learning experiences that force that muscle to be used, right? So instead of saying, hey, and then I was talking to some higher education folks, hey, go out and write an essay, right? It needs to be, and Cornelia, you probably are doing this, right? It needs to be something like, bring in 10 essays tomorrow. Now read them in the room, tell me which one you're going to submit, exchange it with someone else, have them review it. They're going to critically, and then you're turning that piece of paper in, right? I need to rethink how I'm creating experiences, it sounds like. I don't know, Nikki, you do this all the time. What do you, those are the 2 paths I'm hearing that people can take here, is like, focus on metacognitive stuff and create my experiences in a metacognitive way. I'm curious what you have to add or say, or how you practically do it.
I think a lot of people are viewing the existing, chat model of LLM and thinking about it in that way. And often they think about it as a supercharged Google question answer. You input something comes out. But rather thinking it about, how can it be to start with, my very dumb intern, and using it to personalize, adapt, recommend, analyze, and going, if I wasn't available, what could I have someone else and be a partner in doing all of that with me, and using that as an opportunity. So if I had someone to just bounce ideas off of, rather than having it be an output machine, have it be, hey, what are 20 questions you need for me to answer to be able to do this well? So now they're actually prompting me to think. And so I'm actually the output machine. They're asking me questions and I have to answer 20 questions. So my team actually helps refine and train our internal models. And when we're asking it to generate an image, we found actually the best way, the most accurate image generation is we actually ask it and partner with it to, define the style by word, style, describe what it's doing, and have it all written out in text before it does all the work. So how are the different ways to interact with it and have it be a thought partner? And as if you were, again, think about it, you're the coach and you're telling about it, and you're exercising your judgment skills, you're exercising your teaching skills, your synthesis skills. And you're going, hey, you said these things, but I noticed you did a poor job of synthesis here. You're doing a poor job. You're doing a lot of repetition here. So what, I'm recognizing where it's doing it poorly. I'm exercising my skills and I'm telling it to go back. And what you don't know is you're doing a job, you're retraining the model. You're doing the exercise of retraining the model here and doing that. And so you're doing this in concert with this. And to bring it back to an applied space for our L&D practitioners here, that's how they are individually improving their productivity, individually doing their own work. but how do they then turn this into something that they can do for their actual users, for the people that they have to create classes with? So how, can they turn this into an exercise? They need to create a harassment course, a budget compliance course. Let's say this can be their assessment exercise. They can generate scenarios for this, for their people, and they can have the bot, put this into a chat bot and run these scenarios with the bot, and have it return, what would you say, to this bot? Would the bot run the scenario? Where's the bot getting it wrong? Where's it getting it right? Can you refine this? Use it as a way to check your assumptions and go, what happened? What went well? What went poorly? And then generate an output. And then the instructor can then review and rate your response and what you did against a rubric.
Yeah.
And go,
and you can even
learn.
And
so
an
this
LLM,
is a way to,
and an LLM could actually help you do that. There's a bunch of stuff to follow up on, but one, Cornelia, I wanted to come back to you, because one thing Nikki was saying is we are training the model by using it. There's a loop, and right, the loop comes back. And so I know that's something you talk a lot about, right? Is this loop of how it affects us. Can you talk a little bit about how, if we are exercising that muscle, we're also using that muscle either in a way that helps us or doesn't help us, right?
Yeah. And further to Nikki's point also, I think it's also beyond just the what are we doing, it's towards the how. And that's coming back to the thinking about the thinking. Because what is really interesting, to take a step back in our interactions with the bot and see how we are engaging with it. Because usually when we're in interaction with another human being, then we're so concentrated on whatever we're going to say, on whatever impression we're going to make on the other person, then we're not really putting that into the abstractive space where we can learn from our own interaction with it. Now, where I'm going with this is that we can use our chatbot ally or buddy, or however one wants to name it, as somebody who helps us to curate this very, very acute perception of how do we interact with another being. Which means that, practically speaking, if you are rude to your chatbot, not only that it gives worse results, which is now, I think, shown by various studies, that if you're rude to your ChatGPT, then the output is not as good as if you're polite and friendly. But it's also something which is going to mirror back on your own habits. Coming back to the human is a habit animal. So you repeat something over time, you're shaping a new pattern of behavior. You're friendly and you get a friendly response from your bot. Well, maybe eventually with that, we can create a new normality of friendly interactions, rather than, well, I'm rude to my employee, he has to do anyhow what I want.
Yeah, no, it's almost like if I am using language more, which we are to communicate with our technology now, right? Then because I'm using it more, the way I use it becomes, it's a muscle. And if I'm using language constantly politely, it's like with the devices, right? I remember when I was launching Alexa, and, it was like, oh, I teach my child to say please and thank you. Not because of it, but because I want them to say that, right? So this thing is super intriguing. Scott, I'm curious your thoughts on all of this, because I know you have very distinct thoughts about this specificity and the fact that we're misunderstanding. And I'm curious how you're responding to basically this, these discussions on, especially because of your empathy stuff. Can you speak to, all of that?
Yeah, the empathy project was pretty eye-opening in how we were doing that, just in the sense that, so much of what we're talking about, and I think where we're at in this nexus of kind of the latest evolution is we're crossing from the quantifiable into the qualifiable in machine learning language. Like we're going from ones and zeros and more bureaucratic bucketing systems of information, which humans are really bad at. Like evolutionarily, we've just not, like, we can only remember the reason that phone numbers are 7 digits. Like there's like very basic things, like we're really bad at numbers. We have now created a inherently number-based ones and zeros system that can communicate all of a sudden now in a language storytelling that we can understand. And so there's this, like Nikki was saying, this fourth revolution now of, oh my gosh, I've got this link between the bureaucratic number-based system and a story foundation. I can tap into the mythos that we've developed for hundreds of thousands of years. That's really powerful. And I think, yeah, recognizing there's always going to be this, I don't even call it its own kind of uncanny valley, or this gap between where that system can still break. So we built this empathy machine learning algorithm that can scan conversations and see where you're being empathetic or not. At its heart, though, the assumption, that the very glaring assumption we're making, is that we ourselves, humans, can understand and define empathy enough to explain it to a program of ones and zeros. And that's just, I just at my core also don't believe that. And so I think there's this giant asterisk of, anytime that I program something that can understand empathy, that's making this big assumption that my definition of empathy is going to be the same as Nikki's, is the same as Cornelia's, and that's not true. And that, again, kind of exposes this fundamental difference of, if we gloss over that definition, or assume that we know something like empathy or compassion or racism or any of these big concepts, as if we could just put a definition to it and just program it away, we're glossing over a really important step.
I think you're really hitting on the fact that language is individual to every person, right? It's literally a shortcut of communication. And because it's individual to every person, and now we communicate with our technology through language, getting back to Nikki's point, a top-down approach just won't work, right? Because everyone's interacting with this thing their own way. And when they say a word, right, they have their own meaning to it. And so it seems like what we really have to do is help the people understand that, in order to have that conversation, right? Understand the limits and understand where they need to bring themselves, which I think is, the theme so far I'm hearing of. And I want to just move us to some practical stuff for a second, because I'm pretty sure the EU is coming out with an AI Act. I think it's the EU. It's coming into force February 25th. There's a bunch of stuff in it. One of the things, right, is any organization that is either selling or deploying AI in the organization has to provide training to their employees. It's going to be a requirement, right? And I know, because GoOne is taking content, right, and you'll have access to so much content and curate it. One of the questions that's going to come up is like, what am I curating? What should I train? It says AI literacy, right? We're not going to get a lot of clarity on what that compliance does. So we can go with just doing the compliance of whatever someone put together. But it sounds like there's a different need here, and there's an opportunity here for us in the learning and development space to take all this stuff we've been talking about in the first section and use this compliance as an opportunity to do something, right? To change this paradigm shift, to go from first principles. And I'm curious, Nikki, when we're thinking about that training and what should be in it, what do we need to make sure to include, and what might not be as important to include that you would think, right? You're going to put together this program for your people. What goes in it?
So Google actually already has a program called Regulation Readiness, because we don't want to prepare training and development for this one specific regulation. We want to anticipate any regulation coming down, and really not do what is
with regard to AI and Gen AI.
With regard to AI, we don't want to be compelled to do what we're told. We want to do what we think is the right thing. And we've already spoken about how women are around 20% less likely to use AI. I don't want to create or reinforce a system of unfair bias where, women aren't utilizing AI, so thereby we don't assign them projects that happen to have AI, and they're not using it because they're not the ones building it, so the use cases don't reflect them. The UX isn't adapted to their needs, or they don't have the time because they take an unfair share of the domestic labor. And so they're not getting those projects. And oh no, we're accidentally reinforcing an unfair gender gap in the workplace. And it's just self-feeding cycle. So how do we actually create, use our position as L&D practitioners to, avoid reinforcing that system of unfair bias and identify opportunities to support equity, not equality, equity in the workplace, and identify the skills that are necessary and enable our leaders how to adapt to a changing marketplace. So it's not the actual skills of the short-term need. How do you do prompting? How do you do that? But how do you enable a changing workforce? So what skills do you need to hire for? How do you support a changing workforce? So leadership skills, actually. It's not the actual short-term needs, but the long-term sustainability needs. How do you recruit and retain? It's cheaper to retain an organization than it is to recruit for a new organization. So really, it's thinking about the long-term needs and really doubling down on our leadership education, doubling down on our, I actually don't call them soft skills. I call them foundational skills. I think you call them natural intelligence, all of those things. So supporting all the needs around it, because, why are we going to develop education when on things that are already out there? What can we uniquely provide for our organization that only we have a voice to? So really supplementing all of that, and then looking to our partners elsewhere to provide the short-term, really volatile and adaptive needs on the rapidly developing technology, because that'll exist. Yeah. But what do we do for our organization, supporting all around it to anticipate what's the right thing to do, not just what we're compelled to do by regulation?
I hear two things. One is actually every person, because now this LLMs are like a human. So every single person is now a leader.
Yes.
Right. Especially if we're just thinking about everything we just said about reinforcing and developing and our bettering ourselves, delegation. But the other thing I'm hearing is normally it sounds like when we're thinking compliance, we're just going to go to the most compliant thing. And what I'm hearing you say is actually just rolling out the compliance stuff that's going to come will reinforce a bias that will end up causing you reinforce a bias, which will end up causing you issues, among other things, such as no adoption, people not using it correctly, people not seeing the productivity because they're not using it effectively, right? Because you've just given them the stuff. So I'm hearing these two things that you have to have that in. Cornelia, with that, how you talk about pro-social AI, and I'm curious, can you extend what Nikki's talking about and talk about how what we're doing isn't just in our organizations, but starts to become this other thing, right?
Yeah, in a way, pro-social AI comes very closely or directly on this dichotomy between opportunity and obligation, and how can we systematically harness AI as a force for social good? And how can we systematically tailor, train, test, and target AI to bring out the best in people and planet? And that sounds like this naive, overly ambitious goal, but it's actually possible. But I think the main shift, and that's where pro-social AI can in a way become the new ESG, is the shift in the intention underneath. Because the first, second, and third industrial revolution were driven by commercial interests. And then the social aspects, they were taken as a collateral damage or benefits from time to another. But if we could this time, in this fourth industrial revolution, really shift it around, and I'm not saying it's an either or, but it comes back to the complementarity of both. But to put the first priority as the positive social impact, and then as a collateral benefit, the commercial benefits.
I also think if we're talking about this thing as a human, and it's right, not as a human, but it reinforces humans, it's available to every person. It's almost like you have to approach this way. And I'm almost hearing, organizations have for a while done ESG because now it's this big thing. But if I can just bring this together, it almost sounds like if I focus not on AI, but on this enhanced idea of pro-social, right? Which AI is now fundamentally a part of, just like internet, right? And by the way, the internet took 15 years for it to move from, even though everyone had, to move to access, dial up, and LLMs happened on day one, and now we're all catching up. So it sounds like I need to think about like the ESG thing. I need to like go back to that, because through that, I then get to the AI. How am I going to use it? Right? How do I think about it? And then you get to the typing, right? And all that stuff. And it sounds like actually, instead of thinking about it the bottom up, what I'm hearing is we need to think about it as we think about top down. The top down is, how do I socially enable people, right? Which, by the way, people who use AI and feel, they feel more creative, they feel more engaged at work. How do I think about that in empowering them to the mindset shift and first principles? And then how do I enable them to use it in a very tactical way, is what I'm sort of hearing, is that we need to rethink about the social and the human in order to adopt the AI. Scott, your thoughts on that?
Well, I love the point Cornelia was making, the through line Cornelia was drawing with the commercially driven fuel of these previous waves of industrial revolution. And I think that there's a reality in that also, I think should be cause for alarm when we think about the kind of business needs driving speed. And what I think we're all talking about is the risks that come with that speed. Or when we think about even boiling it back down to what Nikki was mentioning in terms of leadership training or the foundational skills, totally agree with that term, by the way. How do we recognize that to do true justice to training things like leadership or diversity, equity, inclusion requires a slowing down? And again, if I want to bring a more diverse group of voices into a conversation, that by definition will slow down the conversation. I want to be hearing from more people. And do we have the fundamental business structure set up to say, yes, it is okay to take twice as long to do this for a longer term payout of diverse voices? Or is the whole name of the game speed, efficiency, move fast, break things? We just want to get things done as fast as possible. And that's a trade-off that we need to be willing to identify and say, this is what we're looking at.
You might be hitting on why, and Carrie had this question, why organizations are struggling, right? They have to catch up, and yet this requires, it sounds like, more thoughtfulness than simply a technical training. So the question I have is, do you find organizations, we know they're struggling with where to begin their AI strategy, right? So I'm curious, Scott, first step, we have great ideas here. What can I do right now to begin?
If I'm a leader in the organization, I would want to make sure that instead of, and I think everyone eager to hear Nikki and Cornelia's too, rather than saying we're using this or we're pushing this out, react or fall in line, I would want to be asking as many questions as I can, and not outsourcing those questions or summaries to my intern, but honestly exploring that to say, what are people struggling with? And is AI even primed in the right spot to help that? Or do I need to recognize that I've got a fundamental UX problem in my internal org, or a representation problem? And that might be totally, I know Josh, you and I talk about, can I create a problem statement? Do I even know what problem I'm trying to define? Or am I jumping ahead to, hey, this does things twice as fast? I don't even know what that means, but sign me up. Twice as fast is good.
Well, and sometimes I wonder, right? So let's think about that. And we have to move fast. So I wonder, Nikki, while we are having more human conversations with our employees and the leaders to understand how, if, where AI helps, and trying to define those problems, should we be rolling out AI or not?
Yeah. I think, we have to be precise in the problem that we're trying to solve. I have a very strict and narrow definition of what a strategy is. I have a strategy doc that I have my team fill out. First, it's identifying the problems and getting precise, analyzing the data around all of that. And so what problem are you truly trying to solve with, and identifying, is AI the right solution to it? AI is a solution, not,
So
not the problem.
yeah.
So what problem are you trying to solve? And then generating ideas. And AI might be one of the ways to solve it, but really it might not be the only way. And then really, I think if you're getting this top-down mandate, because it's coming from a place of FOMO, which I think a lot of leaders are experiencing, I think a way to then buy yourself some time. This is real deal practical advice, because I know we're in a place where we're getting that, like, hey, my leaders want me to incorporate AI. I need to do something about AI. While you're buying yourself that time to have that conversation, to truly identify the real problems, how may AI solve it, do a case study. I guarantee you there's someone in the organization who's playing around with AI, who's enjoying it. Find that person, get them to write a case study, a white paper, do a little thing, do a brown bag lunch, a tech talk, and get them to talk about it. That will buy you time to then do your larger real deal strategy.
And I think what I'm hearing behind that is, and by the way, I'll just say, I think investing in AI right now and going ahead and getting Gen AI or going through the legal process of choosing a chat GPT or whatever, it costs a ton of money, but it's coming. It's integrated, right? And I also think there are people, like you said, who are using it. So we can either ignore it and say, don't use it, right? We can say, we know this is going to save us some time, so go ahead and provide it, but don't require it, right? But what I'm hearing you say is there's a skill necessary, which is before I require people to use it to solve problems, I have to help them learn how to solve problems.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not hearing you say, and I just want to make it clear, hold off on any investment in AI. Correct. Because I also think, like you said, people are using it. And there are people who want to use it. And especially in a year or two, you won't be able to recruit people. Right. So then I'm hearing the third thing, which is I need to set some sort of boundaries, whether that's we're not investing in it right now, but you can use it for personal stuff on your personal device, whether that's you can use whichever one you want, free version, but don't follow our data policy, right? Whatever that is, whichever one has a data policy. So can I just clarify, is that what I'm hearing, or do you disagree with the idea of even providing access or even encouraging access?
No, I think a lot of people have access to the ChatGPTs, the Geminis of the world, and doing that. When I hear AI strategy, I'm thinking the request is for a formal AI upskilling strategy and going full bore there. And I think that takes a little more precision and a little more thoughtfulness. And so while you buy yourself time to do that with the care that I think we all believe it takes to do it with first principles and with with the natural intelligence, with the leadership skills and all the skills that takes, versus cramming it in. We're just gonna turn on the AI feature in our LMS and we're just going to turn that in. I think to do it with the care and consideration we think that it truly deserves, to buy yourself time to do that and do that well. You can also, in parallel, find the person who's playing with it, do that, find out how it's adding to their lives.
Or do it yourself.
Yeah, do it yourself. If you are playing with it, if you're the one doing it, I think play with it yourself. And I guarantee someone in the company who is doing it and doing it well and enjoying it and doing it with enthusiasm. So find out how it's doing it. Find those people, get those case studies together, and then you can do your formal, here's how I recommend a full upskilling strategy for everybody.
And I'm going to go to you, Cornelia, with this question. And, thinking about a strategy, if I said, what's your internet strategy? It would be a ridiculous question, right? And the internet did take 15 years and we had the time to set a strategy. So it seems like the main problem, and this gets to what you were saying, Scott, is we need to build a strategy for this thing, but it's already out there. It's already a part of the landscape. It's not even a thing we have to adapt, right? It's literally like me saying we have to develop an internet strategy. So you have this dichotomy. So Cornelia, what do we think about, or how do we approach that gap right now? Or how are you thinking about approaching that gap?
Yeah, I think away from the everything is a nail because we have a hammer now. A good way is to shift away from the what and where towards the why and who, and to take a step back, put things into perspective, and rather than using AI to do more at lower cost, think about what makes you unique and where can AI now help you to do more of that very specific, unique stuff that makes you unique. And that's an advice that I give both to coaching but also to organizations, because now everybody tries to put the sexy label of AI.
So you're essentially saying leaders need to do leader stuff and have a development conversation with their individuals and include AI as one of the possibilities in that, is what I'm hearing. Is that?
But it's exactly as you say, it's one of them. And what is, I think, going to become ever more precious in the years to come is that authentic something, our quirks and caveats that make us very human and that we like to shy away from, that we like to put under the table. But when AI can sing and talk and read and at some point be embodied in a robot, well, then maybe these quirks and caveats, they will make you stand out if you embrace them and if you harness them.
Yeah, I love that. I do these fake avatar videos sometimes, and I do a lot of gestures, right? And looking over and stuff. And of course, people, because it's so over the top and it looks like me, they never believe it's AI. So it seems like enhancing your quirkiness and going into your humanity, right? And now having leaders go and say, what is it you're trying to accomplish, and bringing AI into that. Sounds like these are the same things we've been doing for years. So frankly, it sounds like this isn't anything new, and it sounds like this group of people is well equipped for it. We have limited time, and I have two more questions. One was about how do we ensure the human oversight? I think we've talked about that one a lot, but maybe we'll provide some more follow-up in an email. But at the very beginning of the conversation, I think this is a great place to end. Someone asked, what are the innovations coming up, right, that we see supporting our classrooms and individualized learning? Right. And perhaps the way you could also say that is, what have you seen or what have you heard of or what excites you about some of the innovations that are going to come? And let's make it really 1 minute. What's an innovation we can use and how we'll use it in the classroom? Nikki, I'll start with you because you work at Google and maybe you know stuff that's already been announced or already out there and you have thoughts in 1 minute.
Are we talking adult learning or youth learning?
Both. Let's say adult learning first here, just because we have adults and we have limited time.
Okay. I'm really excited about the innovations coming in automated proficiency measurement. So there are things we know. I was a classroom teacher, and there are things we know about how a teacher can observe a student. And my background really comes in assessment and assessment science. So evaluation metrics and et cetera. So there's a lot of bias and really just inaccuracies in how we evaluate whether someone actually knows something. And so a teacher, through time and observation, and as you go along and observe a student, can know how proficient and exactly where you're struggling. There's a lot that's being done with machine learning and AI these days that can observe and evaluate how you're doing, then provide you hints, additional education, and then assess your proficiency at a specific skill, and then tell you where to go get additional coaching on that. So there's a lot of
better
new
ways.
better
ways, almost with Scott, to measure this empathy or measure these things that you couldn't measure before to give individualized learning. Scott, really quickly, what innovation are you excited about next year, AI, in the classroom?
I think when we think about regression to the mean and how some of these technologies will rely on that, it will by default or as a forcing function show us where those outlier cases, just like Cornelia was talking about, where are the things that are going to make us either truly human, truly revolutionary. I think there's going to be a really interesting push-pull dynamic.
So I think almost the ability to maybe see the language that users are learning and capture all that, right, gives us so much more information and allows us to do individualized stuff and stop going to the mean,
Or
right?
if tools can squish all of communication down to the most predictable pattern, where does
where the outliers. Cornelia, really quickly, one thing that's exciting you, because we're at time, about this year, next year, learning.
Flipped classrooms with personalized coaching 24/7, which then frees up time for human beings, for teachers, for mentors to really spend quality time with students and with others.
Awesome. Well, hey, everyone, I'm going to pass it back to Emily. But before I do, feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. I want to say a big thank you to our panel here. This was an awesome discussion. I have a feeling we at least will continue it because there's so much to talk about. Yeah, Emily, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. This was lovely. So many good takeaways. My notebook is filled, and that's always a good thing. Still a writer at heart, I guess. For everyone watching, we will share the recording of this, and we will have a complete recap as well on go1.com, so you can check it there. And with nothing else to be said, thank you. Happy holidays to everyone. A great way to close out 2024. Bye.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.